A grandmother savagely slaughtered in her own house.
It was a bloodbath.
The killer raped her, slashed her throat, and beat her to a pulp.
It was just absolutely brutal.
The woman's screams wake up her 6-year-old granddaughter. The terrified little girl tells cops who did it.
She said it was Uncle Clarence. She said it was Uncle Clarence.
Clarence Elkins, the girl's uncle. But Clarence told police,
I didn't do it. I didn't do it.
But a jury said he did, and Clarence was sent to prison for life. How he would ultimately prove his innocence is such an amazing story, you'll think it's ripped from an episode of CSI.
Forensic science, in reality, is deeply flawed.
The beautiful rolling hills of Ohio, an oasis of green in the drabness of the Rust Belt. Like many of the good people here, Clarence Elkins made his living at a steel plant.
I was a hot and cold forging operator. I was finally able to make a day shift. Then the inevitable happened.
The inevitable, the cold-blooded murder of Clarence's mother-in-law, Judy Johnson.
We had, I would say, an average relationship, you know, any son-in-law and mother-in-law would have. I didn't have anything against her in any way.
The killer beat Judy so severely, her nose, jaw, and collarbone were fractured. Then the monster took Judy's 6-year-old granddaughter to her room and did the unthinkable.
The little girl ended up being attacked as well, raped, assaulted, knocked unconscious, left for dead. Fortunately, she survived.
The next morning, the girl regained consciousness and left a chilling voicemail for a friend.
I'm sorry to hear how you did, but my grandma died, and I need somebody to get my mom from me. I'm all alone. Somebody killed my grandma.
Still naked from the horrific assault, the little girl ran next door for help.
Unclothed, blood streaming from her forehead, knocked on the door and told the neighbor that somebody had hurt her grandma and her. And the neighbor at that time told her, just wait, I'm gonna call your mother.
But for some strange reason, the neighbor left the girl on her doorstep for 45 minutes before taking her to her mother.
When a child appears on your front step in that way, why wouldn't you invite the child into your home? Why wouldn't you wrap the child up in a blanket? Why wouldn't you call the police when a child has obviously been assaulted?
The girl told the neighbor the killer looked like Clarence. That was enough for police to get an arrest warrant.
I remember hearing somebody come up the driveway real fast.
A SWAT team swarms Clarence's house and immediately slaps the cuffs on his 15-year-old son, Clarence II.
They told me I was under arrest for the murder of Judith Johnson, and I just said, what? I didn't even know what to think about it. It was almost like you're in a dream, but you can't do nothing about it.
He never had time to process the fact that his own grandmother was murdered.
It was disbelief to me. It didn't seem real.
And the boy wasn't even the suspect. His brief arrest, just collateral damage in the search for who cops thought was the real killer. His father.
I said, well, what's going on? And they said, turn around, put your hands up, and walk backwards slowly. And I'm like, you got the wrong house here or something. And then eventually they told me about a half an hour later that I was a suspect in a murder of my then mother-in-law, Judith Johnson. And I said, you have the wrong person. There's nobody here that ever has done anything like that. And they said, well, they had a witness, and it was the 6-year-old girl.
In the county jail, Clarence found support from one man who believed in him, Pastor Tom Williams.
When I first met Clarence, I said, I want you to look me in my eyes. I want you to tell me, did you do this? And he looked at me and said, I did not do this. I don't even know what's going on. I did not do this. And from that moment on, he had me.
Defense attorney Larry Whitney says Clarence couldn't have been at the crime scene because he was at a bar more than an hour away.
Although we didn't have an alibi for that time, we had a virtual alibi. We had evidence as to where he was in such a way that he would have had to flew at 80 miles an hour to get to the scene of the crime and back.
Clarence stood trial for murder, attempted murder, and rape.
The motive was the difficulty that he had with his mother-in-law personally.
There was no physical evidence tying Clarence to the crime scene, but the eyewitness evidence, the little girl's claim. And at trial, her story dramatically changed. Instead of saying the killer looked like Clarence, she told the jury it was Clarence.
In my cross-examination of her, was that was one of the discrepancies. Didn't you tell the neighbor that it looked like Uncle Clarence? And then later on, you ended up saying, it was my Uncle Clarence.
Jurors believed the little girl and convicted Clarence. The sentence, life in prison.
I thought, well, pretty much my life is over now.
The moment he walked through the prison gates, Clarence knew he had a target on his back.
It's not a safe place. With the charges I was charged with, most inmates don't look on that too lightly. I was always having to watch my back. Lost faith in the justice system and lost trust in about everybody.
For years, Clarence rotted away in his prison cell. Then a sensational new development gave him hope. Science was about to turn this verdict upside down. His legal team used new technology to test skin cell DNA left in the little girl's panties.
We see DNA testing that can be done because that gives you a clear answer, yes or no, if the person's innocent or not.
And the results prove that DNA didn't belong to Clarence, but to a mystery man.
I realized that somebody was framing me, somebody was setting me up.
But just who was framing him? Next, Clarence turns from inmate into his own CSI investigator.
I seen him putting a cigarette out.
How a tiny cigarette butt becomes Clarence's big break.